Hi, my name is Dan Wang. I'm the Lambert Family Associate Professor of Social Enterprise here at Columbia Business School. So for my research, I study the science of social networks. And in particular, what I mean by that is I study the science of how we measure not only who we're connected to, but also how the folks who we're connected to are connected to one another. And I study this phenomenon in the context of understanding a variety of different outcomes that affect organizations, firms, and people. Everything from global migration and social activism to entrepreneurship and innovation. What I've done quite a bit of work on is understanding the structure and pattern of relationships between venture capital firms and the startups that they invest in. We typically think of startups and VCs as playing distinct roles. Startups build a business and they build products. VCs fund that effort. But in reality, the relationship between VCs and entrepreneurs is far more complex and also far more interesting to me. Because what I'm interested in is understanding not just how the nature of the relationship between VCs and entrepreneurs can be a pathway of mentorship and knowledge exchange, but in turn, how the connections between VCs and entrepreneurs and other startups and other VCs also factor into the collective decision-making that ultimately supports a startup's growth and their ability to come up with new innovations and reach new heights when it comes to creating value in the market. If you receive funding from a venture capital firm as a startup founder, and your venture capital firm begins funding a competitor, that actually is bad news for you. We find that when that happens, you as a startup founder tend to be less productive in introducing new product introductions, less productive in applying for patents as well. And the big reason why is that often when your VC funds a competitor, then there is a pathway of information leakage from you to the competitor that can act as a competitive threat to your own sense of success. If you're a startup founder and you receive funding from a group of VCs, often called a syndicate, that have all co-invested with one another in the past, then you're not likely to reach an exit that's huge, let's say a public market exit or an IPO, initial public offering, but you're far more likely to exit by acquisition, and you're also far less likely to fail overall. But if you're a startup that receives funding from a group of VCs that have never worked together, then you are far more likely to go IPO, this huge exit, but at the same time, you're also much more likely to fail because it's harder to coordinate among a group of VCs that have never worked together in the past. I think relationships get amplified in the digital age. And what I mean by that is that when platforms make it possible for us to expand our networks, the closest ties that we have tend to be even more important to us because there's so much choice available. And so your most trusted advisors, if you're a startup and they happen to be, let's say, venture capital firms, well, they become even more important. Your most promising startups, if you're a venture capital firm in the digital age, tend to be even more promising as well. And so there's this paradox that emerges, which is that with an abundance of information and an ability to broadcast to all different kinds of sources, the relationships that we have that are strongest, that are the most important to us, tend also to be even more important. The insights from the results are actually pretty general and can be applicable to our everyday lives. We often think that building relationships and expanding our networks is a good thing because that offers us more sources of information to flow into us. But what we often lose sight of is that it's a two-way street. Our networks can also be sources of information outflow away from us as well. And so it's that tension that I often think about when developing and advising folks on networking strategies. And I hope you also think about that as well.